This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we're going to take a look at recursive CTEs, or recursive common table expressions. And this is where we have some type of hierarchical data that's stored in a table that we want to collect and organize in more of an orderly fashion with respect to the hierarchy of the data. And in the case of Northwinds, we kind of have a situation where we have employees that have managers specified as the report to, so you can kind of create like an organizational chart based off of the contents of this table. If we look at the relationship of the employees table, we see that there is a recursive relationship between the employees table, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new database diagram so that we can see that. If we look at the employees, this is going to show that I have that recursive relationship, and if we look at that with our properties, it's indicating that the employees.reports to is joined into the employees.employee ID. So there is that recursive relationship, and we're going to use that to essentially do our recursive CTE. Now this is going to be something that I'm going to be using a union statement within the data. So I'm going to start with my employee CTE, and this is going to be as, and I'm going to be selecting the employee ID, first name, the last name, the title. Go to the next line. This is going to be the birth date and the reports to. And this is going to be from my dbo.employees. And this is going to be where my reports to is null. So this is going to essentially be the very top of that hierarchy. And then we want to go ahead and union this. We're going to do a union all. And the next thing we want to do is we want to, and I'm going to move this in here, do a select statement where we're going through, and in this case, we need to use a join. So we want to go ahead and essentially alias our employee that we'll be selecting from the DBO employees table. This is going to be the employee ID. We're going to have the first name, the last name, the title, the birth date, and then also the reports to. This is going to be from DBO employees. This is our E alias, and then we are joining it on our CTE. So this is where we get into the recursive relationship, and this is going to be our employee CTE, and I want to go ahead and give it a CTE as the alias. This is going to be on CTE dot employee ID, and this is going to be equal to the E dot reports to, and that is essentially going to make up that recursive relationship. If we go ahead and select the data from that CTE and run that query, we should see that at the very top we have reports to of null, and this is Andrew, who has an ID of 2, and then following that we have all of the people that report to Andrew. And then if we look at the data, we have Stephen Buchanan, which is 5, then we have everybody that reports to Stephen, even though it's not exactly in the relationship that we would expect. I would rather have this data underneath Stephen. And if we look at how Oracle handles something similar, where we have a hierarchical relationship, it doesn't use a CTE. It has a different way that it deals with that. And we're going to go ahead and skip over to our SQL developer, and we are going to stay within our employees because we have a recursive relationship between our employee ID and we have a manager ID there. So that's going to give us more of a recursive relationship. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. And what we want to do is we want to select the employees. And when we start with something, we're going to start with the value where the manager ID is null. That's kind of the top level of the organization chart because that person doesn't report to anybody. And then we want to essentially explode out our relationships and create that hierarchy with our select statement. And to do this, Oracle provides us with a couple different clauses that we can use where we can start with a specific value and then we can connect it by prior. So this is going to give us a way to connect the employee ID to the prior employee ID to the manager ID and establish that relationship. So what it's going to look like is if we come in here for our employee and we're going to select our employee ID, the first name, last name, maybe email, phone number, the salary, the manager ID, and maybe the department ID. And this is going to be from employees that we're selecting this from. Then I want to go ahead and specify my start with, and this is where I have my manager ID is null, because this is going to be the very top of that hierarchy if we were doing some type of an org chart. And then we want to connect by prior employee ID with where it equals the manager ID. So that employee ID of that first record that we're getting with the manager ID is null. Then essentially we're going from that point using that person's employee ID to then connect to the manager ID and get those employees. And it's just going to go ahead and go from there. If we go ahead and execute this, then if we look at the data, we have our first employee who has a manager ID of null. So this is the very top level of the organization chart. And working for Stephen, we can see that we have Nina Yang. And if we continue down, we have Den Lee. We also have Adam Fripp. So we can see that it's basically going to essentially start going down a node. So we have Nina Yang. That's one of the nodes reporting to Stephen. And then who reports to Nina is going to be Nancy, and then also Jennifer and Susan and Herman and Shelley. But reporting to Nancy then is going to be Daniel, John, Ismail, Jose, and also Louis. And we can kind of see that we can build out our organization chart based off of the relationships between the employee and then the manager ID. And this connect by is essentially providing that hierarchical structure in our data for us to use. Typically, you see this for like organization charts. You also see it for bills of materials where they're exploding out that hierarchical relationship, because with bills of materials, you have assemblies that contain parts that are on a bill of material, and it has n-level parts, and then it also has assemblies, and then the assemblies have parts, and it's just kind of one of those hierarchical relationships. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense, showing you that you can do recursive CTEs with SQL Server, but when you get to Oracle to handle those hierarchical relationships, you have the start with and the connect by prior, and that takes care of the hierarchical relationships there.